Cool.
I'm only here temporarily.
You're only here well, all of us are only here temporarily, in a way. You knew I'd say that.
I know. What's your name?
Jim.
Jim, Dan Fisher.
Nice to meet you. Oh, wait a minute. I think I've emailed with you before.
Yeah, what's
I
your
recognize
name?
it. Flannery.
Flannery, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just interviewed Oryx for a project for Mind Freedom recently.
Oh, good.
So I was chatting with him a little bit about you.
Yeah, he and I work together at the Confinement Center.
Great. So what brings you down here to New York today?
Lucy.
Lucy from Peanuts. $500 for psychiatric help.
It just went up, right. 5 cents to $500. What brings me down here is I'm outraged. I'm a psychiatrist. I went into the field to try to change the field. From my own experience, my own lived experience of being labeled with schizophrenia, being locked up involuntarily on 3 occasions, and I thought, mistakenly, that if I became a psychiatrist, I could change the system from within.
Yeah.
Not possible. We need to change it from outside.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because you just saved me all the effort of going through medical school to try to change the system from the inside as well.
Well, maybe one of the other professions. Psychiatry, I originally applied for social work school, actually. At a PhD, I have a PhD still in biochemistry, and I was doing research at the National Institute of Mental Health on neurotransmitters in the late 60s, early 70s. And I came to the conclusion that we were more than our chemistry, which put me over the edge to a breakdown that became a breakthrough.
Yeah.
But I decided that what I needed to do was to get a degree and go into the field. So I thought social work would be good enough. And they turned me down in social work school.
You get turned down?
Yeah. They said, we've never had anybody with a PhD in biochemistry apply to social work school.
Wow.
No, you're not. Maybe they thought I was crazy. I don't know. But so you should go do something about this. You want to do something?
Well, I guess I'm here.
Yeah, you're here.
I'm doing
you're
this.
Something.
Yeah, I'm trying to use my techie geek skills to try to spread awareness and get the word out.
Well, we need to educate people for sure. And I'll give you an example. So I asked on Facebook, you saw it, the people that I'm friends with, to give me advice on what to say here. And one woman who had come to see me with her son a couple of years ago said that by giving him hope, that it made all the difference. So he had been in high school, diagnosed schizophrenia, and told that he should never expect to work full time, just with volunteer jobs. Terrible prediction, and always have to be on medication. So they came to see me, and I said, no, don't believe that. People do recover, and you don't have to take medicine the rest of your life. I'm off of medication. Became a psychiatrist. Maybe that's a sign of health. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know if in a way it's a good thing to say to people, but it might scare some folks off.
Might.
Yeah.
I have a family. I have 2 daughters and a wife. My daughters are activists also. But in any event, she told me that he has managed to get off of medication, that he now is able to socialize and have hope. And the main difference was hearing that there was hope. And so if by interviews like this you can get the word out that these are not life-ending situations, that people go into other realities to heal. They don't go into these other realities as an illness. Get that across. Yeah, it's great.
I think that's a good message.
I think so. Yeah.
So here's a gold question. Why do you think there's not more of the psychiatrists from inside out here with you? Why do you think that is?
Well, part of it's financial. You don't make as much money here as you do there. Part of it's reputation, which begins connected to money and status.
Sure.
I mean, I'm 74. I still practice. I do open dialogue. I have families come to see me. I run a center, the National Empowerment Center. And we do get some federal funds, which could be a jeopardy in a way by protesting. But I feel at this stage in my life, I talked to my wife about it, and she said, okay, so, if you can't speak up, who can? But they're not retired. They're from their... I worked in a clinic for 25 years. and I was a medical director, and I wrote out scripts. I was doing that because I had 2 children.
Right. A lot of the psychiatrists that I've heard speak out are retired. That seems to be
my generation,
a consistent thing. Yeah.
Well, also we were trained in a different era. That's another thing. Is I was trained in an era when actually we were trained to do therapy. We were trained to look at the social dimensions, and we weren't trained to just immediately give them medication. And I see medication as a last resort, not a first resort. I'm not strictly opposed to it. I think that if there's genuine informed consent, people make a voluntary choice, and they know that it's not the only ingredient to their recovery, then taking medicine, I'm not strictly opposed. But I say it's not forever. I warn people about the withdrawal. And when I give a person a script, I say this will not solve your problem. Right. This will assist you as it comes from inside. Yes. But it's gotten very polarized, very polemical. And the worst of it is that I think medication is a belief more than an actual physiological.
Like in a placebo effect kind of way?
Well, in a way, it's an active placebo because it does have an action. A lot of actions are dangerous. But I was giving a talk several years ago on a woman, some NAMI, and there's some good and some bad NAMI. But this woman got up and she said, it was in Boston, she said, I don't know about you all here in Boston, but we believe in medication. And I was very struck by her use of words, believe in medication.
Right.
Like it's a belief, sort of like a sacrament, like some religion. I personally am do not want to be a priest in psychiatric religion. I think people, I was raised Unitarian, so everyone I think heals themselves. But that's why I think they're not here. They feel that to get the benefits of the psychiatric system and the money, that they have to believe. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you know how is the sound coming through all right? Okay. Let me ask this. Do you mind, while I go grab a jacket, because I'm colder than I expected to be, do you mind, because I want to ask you about open dialogue therapy, because I feel like nobody knows about open dialogue, and more people should.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Give me 1 second, don't run away.
We'll pause here. Are we pausing? Are you Siri? that's what appears when I ask Siri a question. What is your name? Sherry. When they see this, or your earrings are a little Siri-like. You got a Siri thing going. Are you locally? Where are you from? Wow, you came here for this?
Texas.
Wow.
Okay.
What do you work with?
Back would feel a little healed.
What is this?
You're also that with dementia.
But you're looking at the other side of things. Yeah. So what? I should ask this one to start. What is this for?
Me.
What do you do?
I don't know. I generally consider myself to be an independent, though I have done some work with mind freedom. So I don't know if I feel comfortable. Like I'm giving a speech today, and Celia asked if I'd represent mind freedom, and I was like, I don't know if I feel like representing a 15,000 people or whatever the mailing list is, but I like the work they do, and I support the work that they do, and I've done some work with them, and so I'm streaming this to the Mind Freedom YouTube channel.
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
As we talk, it's being streamed.
Yeah. So there you go, and it's on Facebook
YouTube.
Live as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't tell you this was live.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, you should have fixed your hair. But yeah, I don't know. I get a little uncomfortable with the idea of organizations, because there's so many distinctions. Everyone has a different experience, and they have slightly different ways of viewing things. And I don't know if like one voice can represent all of these different people and perspectives. So I got uncomfortable with that.
Voices, so that's different.
Yeah.
You're not saying it's just your voice.
No, I'd rather be trying to get all these different people like yourself.
There's some interesting people.
Speaking of open dialogue therapy.
Oh, open dialogue.
Tell me a little bit about open dialogue therapy.
Well, open dialogue, it's an approach, I feel, more than therapy. And in fact, the Finnish developers of it describe it more as an approach, a philosophy. And it's how to reconceptualize the problem is a big part of it. And their historic roots are within family therapy, but they feel that family therapy hit a dead end in the U.S. It was developed here in the U.S. and it hit a dead end when it blamed the parents. That was definitely not good. And then in the 80s here, instead of the parents being blamed, the individual, who's protesting their life became blamed. And there's, chemical imbalances. So they, in Finland, starting in the 80s, a group of psychologists, and I've met them, they're from Tornio, Finland, which is up on the Arctic Circle. And they said, what if we don't blame anybody? And we just say, this is a system of people or a group of people that are all struggling, as they're struggling together, and the difficulties just manifest in one person at a given time. And that resonated with me a lot. And in fact, it was the only clinical approach that I've really been comfortable with. I've trained as a psychiatrist, but I don't like the more analytic approach. I don't like the Gestalt. I mean, a lot of these are still directed at an individual. And I don't like the way family therapy is practiced here, which is still tends to blame the parents in a way. Or worse than that, psychoeducation here, which is teaching the person who's identified take their pills, and accept that they have an illness. But in Tornio, with open dialogue, they say every voice counts. And they convene as a pair of therapists or facilitators, and they're very open. If they have a difference of opinion, they state it openly. So I went out with their team.
Is this with Chris Gordon?
Chris Gordon was in the same class as I was, the first class. And there's Celia. I got distracted a little.
It's all good.
So I practice open dialogue. I got 2 years of training from these psychologists from Finland, along with Chris Gordon. And families come to me and they say, well, my son, usually a son, has been diagnosed and other treatments have not helped, but we hear that you have a different approach. And basically I say, well, your son may have been diagnosed, but it's really the family as a whole. Are you blaming us? No. It's the family as a whole can heal together. And so I invite as many people as comfortable for the person who's originally had the difficulties. And it's really worked quite well. Sometimes I do it by phone if they can't be there in person.
Now, do you use two therapists? Because one thing I've heard about Open Dialogue, which is unique, is that they use two people.
It is best, but I do it on my own.
Okay.
And I use one of the other family members as sort of a conversationalist. Say, well, let's us talk, together about what we're experiencing, and then the family will comment, and I'll switch to someone else. Sure. So they're sort of learning self-therapy too. And I also use something called emotional CPR, which we developed over the last 10 years, an alternative to mental health first aid, which is really from the grassroots. And it's what we, in our own recovery, found most valuable, which is to be with the person, not to fix the person, to accept the unknown, to be present. Many of the same principles of dialogue, except we emphasize more the nonverbal, emotional. I have a feeling that we're going to be starting now.
Wait, is that the hearse up there? That black car?
This car is
What's that other car?
I don't know, somebody.
What's your name?
Hi, Dan. You ready? Here's how we're doing it. This just came out today.
Oh, where do you live?
You're going to be
Where do I live?
five.
In Connecticut.
Okay?
Oh, where?
Oh, here we go. A banner's going on.
What? Oh,
I need a t-shirt. Got any extra t-shirts?
Where is it?
Near Hartford.
Oh,
If I just mentioned the name Dan Fisher or
oh, I live in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn.
Yeah, you need.
Would you like to be? I'm doing a live stream. Do you mind if I interview you? Would you be on an interview that I'm doing here? Would you like to join?
Oh, okay.
So thank you very much. Dan.
Sure thing. It was great to meet you in person.
Where was
Live
it
to the internet,
streamed?
all around the world, or to maybe like 15 people. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So tell me what brought you down here today.
Oh, I guess just any kind of demonstration against against force psychiatric treatment.
Yeah.
Just anything like that at all. Yeah.
So what's your reason for, I mean, it almost sounds like a silly question to ask, but why are you against forced psychiatry?
Because it forces diagnoses and it makes up these life stories about people, and it forces and you're forced to sort of it forces you're forced to carry this story about you, which a lot of the times aren't true.
Is this something you have first-hand experience with?
Yeah. I've been living it for 30 years, or even more than that, 40 years, 30 to 40 years.
Sorry, do you guys mind? There's some folks with a wheelchair trying to pass through.
Okay, wheelchair coming through.
And luggage too, just as important, almost, but more important. This guy. Thanks.
All right. Okay, let's get.
So, sorry, I got distracted by that. Do you find that there was anything helpful about your experiences
Well,
with
there
psychiatry?
was one person during my time at South Beach who tried to help me. I mean, a staff person.
And what's South Beach?
That's a hospital in Staten Island.
So there was one person that was helpful too. What about the?
Well, that was in the 80s.
Okay,
I
that's
have
30 years ago.
Yeah.
Or almost 40.
Oh, look at that!
Oh shit, that's gross. It's symbolic though of I don't know what it's symbolic of, but of New York, I guess.
Yeah.
It's New York for you.
Yeah. Well, what you? So what would you like to ask again?
I don't know. How would you like to have been treated? Like, we're here complaining. What would you have? How would you want to be treated?
Like someone with dignity, like that my experiences, that what I knew, that I knew, that the things that happened, that I knew that the things that happened to me actually happened. That they happened to me. I mean, what I mean by that is that I wasn't making up stories.
So they accuse you of lying?
Well, I don't know how to characterize it, but it was sort of like it was negative. It was sort of like I can't think. I have trouble thinking of the words, but it's trying. It's like your experiences didn't mean anything. Your ideas, what you know, it doesn't mean anything to them.
So let me ask you if this is accurate, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. All right. So let's say I say something, and someone calls me a liar. I might get upset that they called me a liar. But if I say something and they don't even call me a liar, but they tell me that I'm delusional and that I don't even know what I'm saying, then it's even more frustrating because I can't even defend that. Because you're not even telling me that I'm lying.
Because they say it's a disease and you don't know and all.
Yeah.
That's the most terrible part, the most horrible part of it all.
Would you like to join my internet interview right now?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, this is an invitation. So do you mind if I bring another person
Okay.
on? Thanks for chatting with me.
Okay.
So, aside from being my gracious roommate, what brought you down here today?
I couldn't let you go.
Yeah.
No, I came to hassle my publisher, whom I accidentally found, who did not have a sign about my book, which disturbed me. Really?
So you're actually on the camera. So tell me a little bit about the work you're doing in the book that you wrote about it too.
Yes. I started out in graduate school and found that I could really understand, seriously mentally ill people. And then I found this guy who had real great guts who could talk to really sick people, and they understood him, and he understood them, and they got better with no drugs, no shock. As my sign says.
Here, sorry if I disrobe you a little bit here. It's okay, right?
I said, this guy is
It's
so
all right.
fresh.
I'm very handsy today.
Right? Take your hand.
Chemical imbalance, the delusion of U.S. psychiatry.
Right. Okay.
So here you go.
And
Looking great.
I want people to know that in Europe they have much better results than we do, and they're pushing drugs mostly to make money. Okay, and if you've got the courage to come and tell me what your problem is, I've got the courage to go down that road with you. I guess that's it.
Well, what about your book? What's the title of your book?
The title of my book is Successful Drug-Free Psychotherapy for Schizophrenia.
So if it wasn't very clear, she helps people recover from schizophrenia using psychotherapy instead of drugs. I don't know if it was obvious. I'm just, it's good to just reiterate and hammer it home a little bit that, I don't know. Yeah, hammer away, right?
Thank you very much for listening.
Cool. Thanks for coming down here. Appreciate it.
Are we gonna, so we're already started.
I don't know 100%. I just got the live stream piece working. I was stuck in the car trying to fix that for a while. And they haven't started doing the speeches, but you could ask Celia. I think you've spoken with Celia before in the red sweatshirt here. Yeah.
When you started with the casket?
I'm not sure, but hey Celia, mind if I interview you for like 5 minutes on the live stream? Do you have 5 minutes?
In a minute.
Okay, sure.
Hi. Hi, Levin. I'm Celia. How are you? Yeah, we
But
talked.
that's right. You're the person. You got a face to the voice. That's right.
So, ambulance. A lot going on here.
Are you Jim?
Yes.
Hi, Marty Feldman.
Hi, Marty. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'll be speaking.
You want to actually? Why don't we sort of do a two-person interview? So
Yeah, Frank
we got
and I know each
we
other
got
quite a lot.
Marty and Frank. So what brings the two of you down here today?
To find, can I go ahead? I mean, for me to come here, I had to find out whether there was any chance of there being a larger movement. A larger movement of survival, psychiatric survivors that's possible anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's very discouraging going on Facebook. So number one was that. Number two, I wanted to see that there were younger people here, and that has heartened me tremendously. I mean, my spirits have already been lifted, and it hasn't even started yet. So,
good. I'm glad to hear that.
And I had.
Do I qualify as one of those younger people?
Yes.
All right, cool.
It looks like it.
That's good. All right, that's cool.
It looks like it. You could be fooling me.
Cool. What about you, Frank?
Well, I'm here because
We want to start. So where the live stream works and you can be speaking.
The camera's going to point that way. So maybe if they stood there and spoke. So what if they stand here and speak? Just facing this way. Yeah.
Okay, I'm here because the actions of those people in there are killing people. And they've killed a lot of people that I know. These drugs kill people. They maim people, they destroy them, they kill them. And, I've never been a compliant patient, and I'm still around.
I'm still around.
Yeah.
You know what I tell people. Basically, one of the few truthful things they say is that people who are diagnosed with SMI, serious mental illness, have a lifespan 25 years shorter.
Right.
So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm 70, so in mental health years, I'm actually 95.
It's true, yeah.
You know, and I think that's pretty good.
And one point that they've made is it's gotten worse since the development of atypical neuroleptics.
Oh, absolutely.
It's gone up 10 years since before then when they were
Really?
using the phenothiazines. Yeah.
Abilify is the most profitable drug sold in the entire world. The entire world. Okay? Or at least it was a year ago. Yeah, we'll see.
All right, thanks, guys.
Hey! Ho ho! Let's get this show! Whatever the rhyme on.
Hey,
We're all going to go out to eat.
hi everybody, psychiatric survivors, peers, everybody from around the world that's supporting us, thank you so much. We're going to start the protest, and we have a number of wonderful activists who are going to be speaking. Our first speaker is Dorothy Dundas, all the way from Massachusetts. She's a human rights activist, and she's going to talk about it is time to end the horror of ECT. Dorothy.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I am an ECT shock survivor from 1960-61, locked up for 4 years when I was a teenager. And I just want to say that the harm from ECT is going on still all over this country. Thousands and thousands and thousands, especially elderly women, are being shocked against their will. Now, I'm going to cut that short, and I'm going to switch over to something that Louisa Putnam in Santa Fe, New Mexico would like me to read about her son who committed suicide at a very young age. This is in memory of Lucas James Finnegan. Luke Finnegan, pianist, poet, chess and soccer player, became disoriented during a street drug trip in Amsterdam at the age of 17. He was hospitalized and put on psych drugs there. He was diagnosed later as having schizoaffective disorder, in and out of hospitals, experienced forced treatment, years of trauma. He was meds compliant the last 13 years of his life. Just out of a hospital on readjusted toxic cocktail of 8 drugs, he, in what he named as unbearable suffering, took his life at 32 years old. He said the drugs stole his soul. So we miss his bright, playful presence and are dedicated to co-creating with you all humane alternatives to the standard of care biomedical psychiatry prescribes. In solidarity, respectfully, Louisa Putnam, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I have one more bit from her. Again, from Louisa Putnam. Here is the story of Luke. When Luke was 8 years old, he had a misdiagnosed appendix which burst, and intense peritonitis, and he had a near-death experience. When he came out of the anesthesia, he spoke of being in a realm of light with helpers and how wondrous it was. Quotes, they, quotes, the helpers, told him he couldn't stay here yet and had to come back to Earth. Then he forgot about the experience, and when he was frightened of dying, I would say to him, Luke, you already died, and found the experience to be wonderful. Luke thought I made that story up to calm him down and comfort him, but it didn't work. Then again, when Luke was 17 and traveling in Europe looking for a spiritual healer, he took He said he looked back at us, his family, and chose to come back to help. 14 years of struggle came after that, but also many, many teachings and gifts of love. He taught us all so much. Luke really taught me to love unconditionally. He also brought me to this moment of meeting you both. This morning, his words to Emily, my younger son Rowan's wife, appeared. To be quite frank, I still maintain the position that suicide is the brightest idea to solve the problem faced by the individual who is bound to suffer pain. Brightest takes on new meaning here, escaping the pain by traveling into the light. And I just would like to say that my roommate, when I was 19 and she was 17, she was killed in the bed next to me by electroconvulsive therapy. So I don't believe in it. I think it is killing people, and thank you all for coming. Doctors of Deception is absolutely the best book which has ever been written. It is out there, you can buy it. Tells everything you want to know about ECT and all of the dangers. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. The people who make the boxes that have the electricity in them are they're in bed with the FDA. They're in bed with the doctors, the APA, the FDA, the makers of the boxes, the shock. They're all in bed together, and it's a money-making venture, and it's a multi-million-dollar business, killing our friends. Thank you.
How's everyone doing? Who's next? Are you announcing? Are you announcing?
No,
She was wanting me to announce it.
I'm not,
Hello?
No.
Jim Flannery. Here comes Jim Flannery. Thank you.
All right, good time. So, when I was trying to plan something to say today, I couldn't figure out who I should be planning on speaking to. You know, like I wish that I could be speaking to psychiatrists, but they don't listen to me when they're being paid to, so I don't expect them to be listening today. And we set up a live stream, and so I thought it'd be nice to speak to the public, but I don't know if I really actually did a good job setting up the live stream. So really the most practical thing, good, then the most practical thing would be to speak to all of you, because you actually showed up today. Problem is, I don't know if there's anything I can tell you that you don't already know about forced psychiatry. That's why you're here. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to pretend that the psychiatrists are actually listening and that this live stream is working. And, you know, I have a pretty good imagination. Having delusions of grandeur are actually one of my special superpowers. So this should work all right. When I first started speaking openly about psychiatry 5 years ago, I started doing it through stand-up comedy. I thought that somehow through comedy I could somehow spread a message. You know, I grew up seeing black comedians speak about the truth of racism and helping people in their community. I thought maybe somehow I could do that for mental illness. And given that none of you have any idea who the hell I am, you can tell that's not going very well. But what I realized is that when I would go and I would tell jokes, you know, nobody knows that there's a movement. Nobody knows that we exist. So I just come off as some crazy guy that probably deserves to be locked up. Whereas black comedians, people know the black people exist. They're interested, they're curious, they want to learn about their struggle. Nobody knows about the psychiatric survivor movement. And that's really unfortunate that more people don't know about us because we don't have the liberty to speak up. We're kind of all hiding, we're in the shadows. And I don't feel like comfortable speaking on behalf of the movement. So all I can do is talk about my own experiences. It's not, you know, everyone has their own thing. So it's okay for me, I guess, to make jokes about my story because my stuff is funny because I got out. I got out of the system, right? So like, I can laugh about it, but there's a lot of people that are still stuck in it. I mean, we got a fucking casket here, right? There's people that are dying. Serious. And like, so it's not, you know, it's okay for me to make a joke about my stuff because, you know, it's funny if I'm tied up in a 4-point restraint and I want to get revenge at the people that locked me up and left me in a room so I could slow the hospital gown so they got to keep looking at my naked body, right? That's kind of funny. if they won't let me wear my clothes and they force me to wear the hospital gown, and so I piss all over myself so that they got to change the gown, like, that's kind of funny, right? It's my story, it's funny. If I take a shit in the floor in their bathroom in the hospital and then I go tell them that somebody did that and they have to go clean up after me, like, it's funny. Like, I feel good about that. The problem is that their response is that that's crazy, that that's a symptom of my illness. And I'm not here to say that these are normal things. Normal people act like that, but I'll tell you this. If you take any person and you put them in a situation where they're locked up against their will, and all their agency and all their dignity is taken away from them, they will resort to whatever measures they can to feel a sense of ownership of themselves. And that's just the reality of it, right? And I was never once violent. I've been locked up 4 different times. Not once was I violent. And I wonder, you know, am I non-violent because I believe in non-violence? Is that like a moral thing? Or is the reality that when you literally are completely locked up, helpless, drugged, being violent ain't an effective strategy? You know, like, it just ain't gonna work. You know, if you were being raped and you used violence as a defense, no one would hold that against you. No one would see any issue with it, right? But if you were locked up in the building and there was no escape, in your mind you would think, oh, if I resist, that's only gonna make my punishment worse. So you end up not resisting to it. And you know, a lot of the people in the psychiatric survivor movement talk about Force Psychiatry feeling like they're being raped. And I know it's a graphic idea, but when you think about it visually, when you think about being tied down to a fucking bed, when you think about having someone getting on you and penetrating you with a needle and injecting a fluid into your body against your will, and then all of a sudden the drapes close on your consciousness and you're never the same, it's not that different. Though there is one big difference, I suppose, between forced psychiatry and being raped, and that is that if you're raped, you believe that you can go to doctors for help and you can go to the police for help. But with forced psychiatry, it's doctors that are doing it to you, that's often the police that are surrounding you, holding you down, and it's judges that are court ordering these things to happen to people. So where do you get your help from? Who do you go? There's really nowhere to go to. So we come, can I do, I mean, like, I'm in the middle of this thing, I know, like, we could talk after. Okay. I'm hurting you?
Yes, and what I would like to say.
Well, I don't mean to hurt you. Like I said, I can only speak about my experience. And if you want to come up and speak about your experience, that's fine. But I don't know if it's necessary for you to interrupt me in the middle of my speaking. I can totally talk to you after. You can come up. Then you can come up and you can speak to everybody when you want to.
How about waiting until we're over here, and then you can speak to us all. You can even have the microphone.
You know, and I don't that I've hurt you in some way with my words. I don't like the idea that I'm in some way dividing you. I'm not trying to here to speak on behalf of you. I'm only here to try to tell you what I feel and how. And so I'm sorry that I really am sorry your feelings are being hurt by what I'm saying.
Go ahead, Jim. I have something to say.
No, it's all right. You know what? The point is this. Regardless, no, thank you, Dorothy. But the point is that you're fucking hurting people. You think that you're treating people, right? You came in here, you threw off my game. I should be better at shutting down a heckler, but I don't know. I feel bad that I've hurt someone's feelings, and I don't feel good about that.
I think this is
It's all good. I'm frustrated because I lost my train of thought and where I was going with this thing. The judges, yeah, they do that thing where they force drugs on you. Yeah. Where do you go? I'm doing all right. Yeah. So yeah, 4 different times I've been locked up. 4 different times. Right? 4 different teams of doctors independently came to the conclusion that I had some sort of neurochemical imbalance, that I would be permanently disabled for the rest of my life, and that the only way that I would ever be well would be to take medication. 4 different teams of doctors, 4 different states independently came to that conclusion. Yet here I stand, I'm a little bit a little emotional in the moment. But in general, pretty damn stable, not on medication, doing all right. I work, I'm happy, I enjoy my life. So one has to wonder, are these doctors wrong? Were they all right and I was just cured by the drugs that they forced on me? Because that's never happened, so I'd be the first. Or did they all independently make the same mistake? Or is it possible that it's all bullshit? It's possible. And I've talked to a lot of other people who have gone through the same experience, that have gone through the system and have recovered. And nobody gets to hear those stories. Those stories aren't broadcast in infomercials promoting psychiatric drugs. Nobody knows that the survivors exist. You know, they are all around us. They're at the grocery store, checking out behind us at the aisle. They're taking our order at a restaurant. Some of them are running for political office and we vote them in. Some of them run Fortune 500 companies that we invest stock in. But nobody talks about it because if you knew that they had a psychiatric history, you wouldn't invest in their damn company. If you knew that they had a psychiatric history, you wouldn't vote for them. So all the people that have that level of power have to keep their mouths shut. Yet the reality is that we're out here, we're not alone, and we're not bad people. We're very nice, we're very loving people. Some of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met in my life, I've met through the psychiatric survivor movement. And it frustrates me a lot that the world is scared of people with a mental illness, because the truth is you have no reason to be scared of us. We're far more scared of you than you need to be of us. All right, that's all, thanks.
I'm going to let you know you're going to have some bad racial politics where a white woman gets to talk and a black woman gets shot down. Okay? I'm going to give you a heads up.
Let's meet you in person. Don't go in on the phone at the first conference call. Oh, it's great.
Every detail. Every detail. Sorry.
Hey, Lauren.
I'm sorry, I haven't used the megaphone in a while. So I'm also a psychiatric survivor, and I've been through many of similar experiences as you, and I apologize for interrupting, but some of the things that you said made me very angry. So I have to say that I was drugged up actually at Yale University as a social justice activist. I helped as a labor organizer, and then we have waves of it growing again. And so I got upset. Because it shouldn't be I feel like it really we need to focus on the disparity issues of race within the psychiatric survivor movement. I know a lot of movement folks here. I know Dorothy. I know Dan Fisher. I know a lot of folks here. I mean, we haven't met like formally, but I know you from online. And it's frustrating to me, and I met Cecilia online, that people of color are not standing here and taking the mic, when it's been honestly white alternative mental health, psychiatric survivors who've been running this movement, and I really would appreciate more people of color stepping up, but also more, people who've been in a very long time to just step down and to let your egos aside and to realize there's racial disparity and to think about people in prison and to think about the children in the streets of Philadelphia who don't have parents, who's, there's levels of drug addiction and just systemic slavery and oppression for so many years that have affected the black community, the Latino community. The police has been targeting the black community, the Latino community, and I really feel like that intersectionality between police oppression and psychiatric survivor and the stories of rape that don't get told in the court systems or get denied because someone is just black, or a woman of color who's black, or a woman of color who's a psychiatric survivor. And I've seen it because I know the courts in Philadelphia. I've worked in the system. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I know that everybody is in a lot of pain around these things, and we're all healing from things, but I feel like it's really important to bring people of color and women of color to the stage.
Thank you for speaking.
Hello? My name is Frank, as anti-psychiatry activist. This might take a while because I wrote something, okay? So bear with me, please. The mental health system doesn't just violate human rights. It is a human rights violation. So long as people are given a right to treatment without the right to refuse or decline that treatment, their rights have been run over roughshod. Across the street from us at the Center, the evangelical high priest, some would say mafioso, of the mental illness religion are meeting. These guys and gals' lives, same as the lives of some of their captives, revolve around a belief in the chimera of mental illness. Mental illness is real to them, very real and devastating. It is this notion of mental illness that puts bread and butter on their tables and keeps them in business, sermonizing about its many evils, living somewhere out in the suburbs or in the high end of town. They would collectively be up a creek without a paddle if there were no mental illness to attend to, or at least nobody who shared their belief, no laity, no suckers willing to invest in the same notion. The point I am trying to make here is that the notion of mental illness is a bill of goods. Listen to the high priest and you could be lost for life. You could be, through this belief, pursuing your own destruction to its ultimate conclusion in silent fear, shame, and grief. Hello. You've bought a bill of goods, lock, stock, and barrel. You become a convert to this negative faith. You own it and everything that goes along with it. Should you, on the other hand, tune out the sermon, should you not listen to the high priest, should you doubt his absolute truth, should you reject his message and the obligado communion of drug taking that goes along with it, then the future once again becomes rosy with possibility and in fact suspenseful. No longer a matter of fate as if written in stone from before your birth. Reject the bill of goods and hope, less a matter of false hope, but real hope looms large. Mental health is the other side of mental illness. It keeps these goons in business providing treatment for what they say it is not. But mental health, just like mental illness, is a bill of goods. It is a concept devoid of meaning apart from its opposite number. Mental illness, a figure of speech, a metaphor, taken literally. Few people are physically sick upon entering the mental health system. However, I can guarantee you that if you were converted by the system, if you were to buy this bill of goods, if you were to be a compliant consumer, and if you were to receive long-term treatment for a so-called mental health condition, over an extended period of time, your physical health will deteriorate, and you will find yourself in poor physical health. Psychiatry is not about improving a person's status and state of being. Psychiatry is about providing treatment for the chimera I spoke of earlier, the holy grail of the profession. It's cash cow, mental illness. The treatment for mental illness is a matter of making otherwise physically healthy individuals physically sick. Long-term compliance, often called adherence to a treatment plan, chiefly a drug-taking regimen, can prove deadly. Psychiatry is not about health at all. Psychiatry is about maintaining the social order and upholding the status quo. Eugenic principles still apply in the sense that psychiatry would quash any perceived disruption to the social order. And you don't quash anything by letting it be. Rebellious youth uppity women, angry blacks, peaceful soldiers, and discontented senior citizens all can find their ailments administered to by psychiatry and the mental health system. The object lesson of the system being, stick to your place, or we will put you in your place, even if it kills you. One of the callers in a teleconference leading up to this event suggested people review the speeches of Leah Harris and Laura Delano, which she thought particularly forceful. I say okay, but don't let any comparison between what you have to say and what those two women said then render you silent. You don't need to compare yourself with another to do a commendable job. Each and every one of us is a valuable person who has something worthwhile to express. Would psychiatry and the mental health system would silence people, would invalidate them, would treat them as worthless, like refuse or fecal matter, we don't have to respond in kind. Every person at this rally is a valuable person who has something of import to relay, and we should recognize that fact and not let anybody's contribution go to waste. The more voices, the more varied voices, the better, and the more impact as a whole we will be able to have. Renee Harlow. We used to compare suicide attempt scars. It is difficult to say, in his case, whether he got careless or successful. Todd Level. Our mothers owned the duplex we were next door neighbors in Charlottesville, Virginia. His sister, someone called intellectually challenged, living in a group home, still talks to my sister by telephone on almost a daily basis. Allison Himes, Bryn Mawr alumnus, blogger, advocate for human rights. She had a kidney transplant after lithium toxicity caused her own to fail. Phil Gare lived above what used to be a converted movie theater in downtown Charlottesville, Virginia. He was something of a fixture in town, and he crossed paths with many local residents. Steve Weiner, Jew by birth, Steve Weiner, Jew by birth, Quaker, friend by choice and inclination. He had once, I believe, been a medical student at UVA before events intervened. Richard Applegate visited me in Gainesville, Florida after I had moved here from Virginia. He wanted to make the trip again. When I called a mutual acquaintance about visiting him on a trip north, it was then I found out about his demise. I'm going to stop here because my memory is foggy, but there are many more. All of these people have something in common. They are no longer with us, and in one fashion or another, they were all casualties of psychiatry. None of them lived to a ripe old age. Recently, I came across a comment Daniel Fisher made in a Mad in America blog. Daniel Fisher, who's right over there. Dan suggested the recent legislative failure on the part of our movement was due to the professionalization of peers and the divergence from its original ideals. I say, all right, let's go there, shall we? I first learned of and connected with what has come to be called the psychiatric survivor movement through a book and magazine, The Radical Therapist, later called Rough Times. The Radical Therapist published a statement and list of 9 demands from the Insane Liberation Front, the short-lived organization with which the psychiatric survivor movement originated. The list of demands was modeled, I hear, after the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party. Those demands that could be said to have been met at the present, I find a little problematic. However, you could draw your own conclusions. Had it not been for that statement and that list of demands, I might not be here with you today. I will read it in its entirety. Hello, Insane Liberation Front. We of the Insane Liberation Front are former mental patients and people whom society labels as insane. We are beginning to get together, beginning to see that our problems are not individual, not due to personal inadequacies. But are a result of living in an oppressive society. I'm going to finish this anyway. And we're beginning to see that our so-called sickness is a personal rebellion in an internal revolt against this inhumane system. Insane Liberation will actively fight mental institutions and brutalization, the brutalization they represent, e.g. involuntary confinement, electroshock, the use of drugs, forced labor, beatings, and the constant affronts to our self-identity. Even in so-called progressive hospitals where many of the physical abuses do not occur, we're still made to feel low, that our concepts of who we are and our beliefs are pushed down so far that we often end up accepting our jailer's society. We will fight to free all people imprisoned in mental institutions. Insane Liberation plans to establish neighborhood freakout centers. Freakout centers, where people with problems can get help from people who are undergoing or have undergone similar experiences. We believe that the only way people can be helped is through people helping each other. People with hang-ups being totally open and sincere to each other. The majority of shrinks, on the other hand, set themselves up as all-knowing authorities from their positions of power, automatically assume that the so-called mental patient is sick and not the society. We demand, with other liberation groups, an end to the capitalist system with its racist, sexist oppression and with its competitive anti-human standards. We believe in a socialist society based on cooperation. And here are the demands from Insane Manifesto. We demand an end to the existence of mental institutions and all oppression they represent, e.g. involuntary servitude, electroshock, use of drugs, and restrictions on freedom to communicate with the outside. 2, we demand that all people imprisoned in mental hospitals be immediately freed. 3, we demand the establishment of neighborhood freakout centers entirely controlled by the people who use them. A freakout center is a place where people, if they feel they need help, can get it in a totally open environment from people who are undergoing or who have undergone similar experiences. I see the freakout center as a place where there will be people who know where people freaking out are at because they have been there and they won't cut them off because they know how devastating it can be. The people that live and work there see themselves as no more sane than anyone that will come there. Everyone is insane and everyone freaks out. Insane Liberation plans to form freakout centers immediately. 4, we demand an end to mental commitments. 5, we want an end to the practice of psychiatry. The whole science of psychiatry is based on the assumption that there is something wrong with the individual rather than with society. We see psychiatry as a tool to maintain the present system. Rebelling often means being immediately sent to a shrink because of emotional disturbance. We see that the majority of shrinks, A, make money off our problems, B, see us as categories and objects. To them, we are an anxiety neurosis or a paranoid reaction instead of a human being. C, foster dependency instead of interdependency by making us distrust ourselves and consequently look for answers in the all-knowing God, the psychiatrist. Many psychiatrists have already used their influence to discredit the revolutionary movement by calling it sick. We see that this will continue and get worse. 6, we demand an end to economic discrimination against people who have undergone psychiatric treatment, and we demand that all their records be destroyed. 7, we want an end to sane chauvinism, intolerance towards people who appear strange and act differently, and that people be educated to fight against it. 8, we demand with other liberation groups an end to the capitalist system with its racist, sexist oppression, and with its competitive anti-human standards. We demand in a socialist society, based on cooperation. 9, we demand the right to the integrity of our bodies in all their functions, including the extremest of situations, suicide. We demand that all anti-suicide laws be wiped from the books. And that's the insane liberation from Portland, Oregon. Let me close by saying power to the people, all of the people, but especially power to those people who have been oppressed by the psychiatric system. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Together we can make a difference. Thank you.
All right, so I've been asked to speak now. My name is Wilda White, and I am the executive director of an organization called Vermont Psychiatric Survivors. Yay, Vermont! We've been around for about 30 years. Our mission is to end psychiatric coercion, oppression, and discrimination. And I've been executive director there for the last 3 years, trying to get our organization more focused on its advocacy roots. And you know, I think the only thing I have to be grateful for from the psychiatric mental health system is that it did qualify me for my current job, because one of the qualifications was lived experience with the mental health system and the resulting marginalization. And so when I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a psychiatrist because I was having problems concentrating and focusing. And he diagnosed me with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. At the time I came to him, I was a lawyer for probably 30 years, graduated from Berkeley Law School, licensed to practice law in 3 states, graduate of Harvard Business School, top 10% of my class. And for some reason, he thought that I must have had a lifetime history of, failing to concentrate with that resume. But anyway, he diagnosed me with this. The medication he prescribed triggered a psychotic manic episode, which he then failed to diagnose for over a year. And as a result, I lost my job. I was teaching at Berkeley at the law school. I lost my rent control apartment in San Francisco. And for those of you who know about rent control in San Francisco, you know that is that's a huge loss. And of course I spent all my money, lost my pension, and was homeless for a few years. And then I saw this job at Vermont, and it said that, experience with the mental health system was a qualification. So I thought I would give myself a test to see if I could craft a cover letter that would make this resume of mine compelling enough to get a job. Not expecting that I would actually take the job. But I ended up taking the job, and it's been actually the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I think that psychotic manic episode really transformed my life and made me a much more authentic person and made me a much more human. And so as much as it destroyed my life, it also gave me new life. But that doesn't mean I want my psychiatrist to be off the hook. And so I was actually told by several other psychiatrists that my psychiatrist committed medical malpractice and that I should pursue litigation against him. And so I went out to try to find a lawyer and found out that I couldn't find a lawyer because lawyers don't represent people with psychiatric diagnoses. There is the exception though. The exception is if we kill ourselves. They will represent the family members of us. Well, I found that just unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I actually found a videotape online of a New York attorney giving a continuing legal education seminar to other attorneys who said, if you have a client who has a previous psychiatric history, let me give you one tip. Run. Do not take their case. Even though they might have great cases, don't take their case. This will save you heartache. Well, I decided to become a lawyer when I was 8 years old. And at the time, I thought I was doing it to fight racial justice. I mean, Margaret Marshall and Perry Mason were my inspiration. But now I'm 60 years old, and I'm taking that same passion that I had as an 8-year-old to fight this injustice against our community, and I am taking my own case to trial. I mean, cases like these are seldom won, and I filed this case in 2014, and I am still alive. They have not managed to kick my case out of trial, and in fact, they've offered a settlement. Now, they want me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. No. And that's what I think I can do. I think I can take this case to trial and get a big verdict against the psychiatrist, and that is what they listen to. Before I did this work, I was a trial lawyer, and I did get big verdicts against people, and it does change things. And so what I'm trying to do, my case goes to trial on June 25th in San Francisco. If any of you are out in the Bay Area, I could appreciate you coming to trial. In the meantime, I'm trying to raise a final round of funding. I've already spent about $50,000 getting my case to trial. I'm trying to raise more. I have a GoFundMe campaign. I'll circulate information about it. But this is something we can do. I mean, the problems are really, really big and hard and complex and multifaceted, but this is something we can do. We can take a psychiatrist to jail, to trial. I wish we could put him in jail. In a very clear-cut case, right? I mean, diagnosing somebody who's licensed to practice law in 3 states, who was an editor at a newspaper working on deadline, who graduated the top of her class at Harvard Business School, at age 50-something, diagnosing that person with ADHD is ridiculous. And then for a year, not realizing that she was psychotic and manic, even as I was telling him I'm psychotic and manic, as my friends and family are saying, there's something wrong with her, she's psychotic and manic. As I'm getting fired for being crazy, he's still saying you're fine. Now, what's really interesting is when I was psychotic and manic, you know, we're supposed to be violent, right? But what I wanted to do was end racism. So I was starting this business to end racism. And he was all for it. And he told me to go do crowdfunding, a GoFundMe campaign. And I think it would be so brilliant to turn that on him so that my GoFundMe campaign is raising money to end him! To end him! So that's what I'm doing, and I hope that I prevail in this lawsuit, because what I want to do after that is take those cases that are not now being taken. I want to commit my life to fighting psychiatry and the harm that they cause through the courts, through that law degree that I thought I was getting to fight racial justice, but to fight that intersectional oppression, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I need your help. I mean, the race thing is really, we do need to talk more about race and psychiatry, because I know at one point when my doctor found that I was going to sue him, he slipped into my medical record a diagnosis of a personality disorder. He said I had a narcissistic and schizophrenic personality disorder, and the proof of that he put in there because I had reported to him that a police officer had stopped me on the street wanting to see my driver's license, and I refused, and I was concerned that this police officer was going to harm me, and he actually wrote in that medical record that I was paranoid because I feared that a police officer might harm me. He actually wrote that. he actually wrote in my medical record that I was paranoid because I believed that I was a victim of racism. And so, I mean, it's the treatment that we get because of our race is a part of our movement, and we really do need to elevate those voices. I mean, if you read my medical records, you'll see people writing that I'm a wannabe Whoopi Goldberg. No, they put that in my medical record, right? And so race, we cannot ignore it. But there's also something we can do, and it's also something that I want to do, and I do need your help. So let's go after psychiatry, and let's try to do it before.
Hi, I'm Angela Serio. I live on Staten Island. In 1976, I was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. And I didn't come across the mental patients movement until 1988 when I found out about the Alternatives Conference. I came home from the Alternatives Conference, and in 1988, I wrote a personal position statement, which I'd like to read to you now because I think it's still as valid today as it was when I wrote it 30 years ago. Wow. Any illness is first characterized by concern, either on the part of the patient for his or her own well-being, or on the part of a friend, relative, or potential care provider for the well-being of that person. This concern is often a subjective judgment of deviation from an established norm. The labeling of such deviation, from an increasingly narrow range of socially acceptable behavior as a mental illness is strictly dependent upon the judgment of a psychiatrist. And psychiatrists have a great deal of discretionary power over which diagnosis to apply. And it's interesting to note that the schizophrenic diagnosis, which implies an inability to communicate rationally, is more often applied to members of the lower socioeconomic classes and used to justify those treatments, such as neuroleptic drugs and electroshock, which do not require much doctor-patient communication. Such treatments are relatively cheap and personal and requires minimal investment in professional skills. Persons closer to the physician's own socioeconomic class tend to be favored with less nefarious diagnoses and treated with those therapies which require more verbal interaction and cooperation on the part of the patient. If we are disturbed, could it not be that our situation is disturbing? The psyche, which rebels against the demands of society, will render an incompetent performance in terms of that society. Psychiatry as an industry has a great stake in maintaining the status quo of a society which has become unwieldy to the needs of the individual. What psychiatrists perceive as deviant behavior could be an attempt on the part of sensitive, aware individuals to communicate the need for change. Psychiatric labeling allows those whom we might influence to ignore our urgent messages of needed social reforms. To the extent that we are stigmatized, ignored, rejected, or ostracized, society is stabilized. More competent, effective ways of dealing with the stresses of modern life could be learned if medicine did not pronounce psychological disorientation a biological defect, fostering chronic dependence upon the mental illness industry. I believe we can make our voice heard. Psychotropic drugs and electroshock therapies do indeed quiet the social atmosphere, at the cost of silencing that voice of alarm made up of those who may well be the most sensitive and foresighted of our species. Now, I'd also like to read you something that came out in March of 2000. Celia Brown was a part of it. It came from the Highlander 30. Some of our leaders got together and they spent 3 days at the Highlander retreat, and this is what they came up with. This is their call for action. And remember now, this is almost 20 years ago. The Highlander call for action. We call upon all people committed to human rights to organize and fight against the passage and implementation of legislation making it easier to lock up, shock, and forcibly drug people labeled with psychiatric disorders. Legislation that is creating the backboards of the 21st century, not just in hospitals, but also in our own homes. We call upon all people committed to human rights to work together to build a mental health system that is based upon the principle of self-determination, on a belief in our ability to recover, and in our right to define what recovery is and how best to achieve it. We call upon people who have used mental health services to heal each other by telling our stories. We call for the creation of literature and other art forms that use our truths to educate, to inform, and validate our culture and our experience. We call upon elected officials, political candidates, and those with power over our lives to recognize and honor the legitimacy of our concerns through their policy statements, legislative proposals, and their actions. And we hereby give notice that we will do whatever it takes to ensure that we are heard, that our rights are protected, and that we can live freely and peacefully in our communities. Those are my heroes. And Celia's one of them.
Dan Fisher. Dan Fisher is up next. It has nothing to do with the fact that he's a doctor.
Somebody else was being raised. Oh, okay. So we're going to have
We're all doing it as a group.
Yeah, it was power enough.
And we're doing a different thing. Wait. This is a different thing. Yeah, I'll hold up. Do you have a copy of the phone? No. I'll just hold it. Are you coming too? Or what's this? Well, this is different than that. I know. But if you want to do this, you can do this.
Hello, everyone. We are reading a poem. This poem is called To Be a Mental Patient by Ray Unziker, who lived from 1948 to 2001.
To be a mental patient is to be stigmatized, ostracized, socialized, patronized, psychiatrized.
To be a mental patient is to have everyone controlling your life but you. You're watched by your shrink, your social worker, your friends, your family, and then you're diagnosed as paranoid.
To be a mental patient is to live with the constant threat and possibility of being locked up at any time, for almost any reason.
To be a mental patient is to live on $82 a month in food stamps, which won't let you buy Kleenex to dry your tears, and to watch your shrink come back to his office from lunch driving a Mercedes-Benz.
To be a mental patient is to take drugs that dull your mind, deaden your senses, make you jitter and drool, and then you take more drugs to lessen the side effects.
To be mental patient is to apply for jobs and lie. To be a mental patient is to apply for jobs and lie about the last few months or years because you've been in the hospital, and then you don't get the job anyway because you're a mental patient. To be a mental patient is not to matter.
To be a mental patient is never to be taken seriously.
To be a mental patient is to be a resident of a ghetto, surrounded by other mental patients who are as scared and hungry and broke and bored as you are.
To be a mental patient is to watch TV and see how violent and dangerous and dumb and incompetent and crazy you are.
To be a mental patient is to be a statistic.
I found out.
To be a mental patient is to wear a label, and that label never goes away. A label that says little about what you are and even less about who you are.
To be a mental patient is to never to say what you mean, but to sound like you mean what you say.
To be a mental patient is to tell your psychiatrist he's helping you, even if he's not.
To be a mental patient is to act glad when you're sad, and calm when you're mad, and to always be appropriate.
To be a mental patient is to participate in stupid groups that call themselves therapy. Music isn't music, it's therapy. Volleyball isn't a sport, it's therapy. Sewing is therapy. Washing dishes is therapy. Even the air you breathe is therapy, and that's called the milieu.
To be a mental patient is not to die even if you want to, and not to cry, and not hurt, and not be scared, and not be angry, and not be vulnerable, and not to laugh too loud, because if you do, you'll only prove that you are a mental patient, even if you are not. And so, you become a no thing in a no world, and you are not. Woo!
Hello? A lot of you know Dan Fisher. He's up next. He can speak for himself, I think. Dan?
Thank you, Frank.
What button in there?
Thank you, Frank.
No.
Thank you, Frank.
Hello?
Thank you, Frank. Maybe the battery ran out.
What kind of battery is it?
Are you pressing the right button? How about this one?
Hello? Oh, you need a 9-volt?
Hello. Hello. My name is Dan Fisher, and I am a psychiatrist. I'm also a person of lived experience. I made a big mistake, I think, thinking that by becoming a psychiatrist I could change the system from within. Very difficult. Here we are out here on the sidewalk. Many of us should be in there talking to people, or they should be out here. We have a definite breakdown in communication here. One reason for that is that the movement, our movement, has taken a position which I think we have to take, which is that we need a revolution, basically. We can enter into conversation, but we also have to have the firmness that the change has to be a very deep-seated change. This idea that we need a revolution is not unique to our movement. The UN Rapporteur for Human Rights last year came out with a statement calling for a revolution in mental health. His name is Dr. Paras, and he said, and I'll quote you, my wife said, "Do you think that's a little extreme, calling for revolution?" I said, no, it's not extreme when we have such oppression going on. So he said, we need a revolution in mental health care to end the decades of neglect, abuse, and violence. Mental health policies are in a crisis, not of chemical imbalances, but power imbalances. in policy making, service provision, education and research, the dominance of the biomedical model. We have to end the dominance of the biomedical model. As long as people are told that their problems are chemical, all the solutions will be chemical. I asked people online to give me some ideas about what to say today, and one was a mother. Her son in high school was told that he had schizophrenia. He was told that he would never recover fully, that he'd have to take medication the rest of his life, and that the best he could do is volunteer job. This is a daily tragedy that's going on right today, right at this moment. Many young people are being told this prognosis of doom. Yet, luckily, they came to see me, and I said, don't believe what the psychiatrist said. They didn't. They heard that people can recover, people do recover. And he weaned down off of medication, he's back in school, he's socializing, and his mother feels that he has a life again. Everybody out there should learn that these are not lifelong conditions. They're post-traumatic. I think the majority, almost all these problems are post-traumatic. So here are a few of the other comments that people made. My good friend George Ebert, I wish he were able to be here. His t-shirt's here at least. He said, end the promotion of psychiatric pharmaceuticals as medicine. Second person said, build communities that are respectful of diversity. And I want to just make a comment about this, our movement is too white. I agree, our movement's too white. And those of us that have been around, we need to make room for people of color, because the intersectionality of oppression is real and alive, and not only in terms of people of color, but also in terms of the queer, gay community. We need to reach out to all marginalized groups. And if we do, our strength will be doubled, tripled, much greater. We see crises as breakthroughs, not breakdowns. We listen to the cries of pains as warnings to society. Medications are overprescribed, overemphasized. We need to tell people that the withdrawal from medication is a very serious period that you go through, and it's not a symptom of mental illness. It's a withdrawal from these medications that really are very much addictive. And you won't hear that over there. We have to stop glossing over the glaring social inequities. We have to stop blaming the survivors. We have to stop labeling, which disempowers. We need a Jean Vanier, who's a French priest, who said, really, we are all equal. We need to enter into every relationship as respectfully as possible. Psychiatry cannot carry out this revolution from the inside. Just as persons with lived experience have led the way in psychiatry and all the innovations in mental health in the last 20 years, we need to continue those innovations. We now know that we must lead this revolution. We need to carry out the theme of nothing about us without us in every realm of the system, in services by having peer-run respites and recovery centers like the Western Mass Recovery Learning Community. In every town, every hamlet should have these. They're less expensive, less traumatic, and they work. We need to have training for recovery of life principles and practices designed by us in every professional school, in every community. Make a little plug for emotional CPR. We've been working on that as an alternative to mental health first aid. Mental health first aid generally is quite oppressive. It teaches the community how to diagnose. We're trying to teach everybody to help everybody, just like that manifesto from the Insane Liberation Front 48 years ago. And then we also need to have evaluations carried out by peers, as are done in Pennsylvania, and have peers significantly present in all policy formation. The system will not give up its power through goodwill. We must organize at every level. At the national level, we've created a national coalition for mental health recovery. We represent 27 states. Helpless Coalition and its voice in Washington grow by attending the People's Alternatives in 2018. I want to say the government did us a favor by not funding alternatives this year. Alternatives will be the people's alternatives this year. Come to Washington, July 29th to August 3rd. We will have advocacy training, we'll have our day on the Hill, and we'll build our movement so that nothing will stop us. Thank you all very much. Hold this.
Oh, that. Oh, the microphone.
The microphone. So they can be heard. Hello? Here we go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Nikame, or Nick. I use they, them, theirs, he, and we pronouns. I am black and mixed race, transgender, genderqueer, gender fluid, gender expansive, neurodivergent, neuroqueer, autistic, trauma survivor with chronic pain. I am a multidisciplinary theater maker, healing, teaching artist and facilitator, creative producer and collaborator with Free the Arts Festival. I'm a lot, and I got a lot to say. You better listen. I don't give a fuck about psychiatrists. That's not why I'm here today. I am here specifically for mad, neurodivergent trauma survivors of color, black, indigenous, and brown folks who have been labeled mentally ill, quote unquote ill, pathologized, institutionalized, medicalized, imprisoned, traumatized, and killed by psychiatry, police violence, and the APA's contributions, i.e. the DSM, to systems of oppression. I am not here for the white people who benefit from psychiatry, who use their systems and want reform. I am only here for those who believe in radical change, creation of new models, concepts, and structures outside of this flawed system. It is known to me and a lot of people at this rally that psychiatrists are immoral, unethical, and by and large do more harm than good, influenced by the capitalism and lack of morality of the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, the world knows this. I am going to read a part from a special report from the Human Rights Council to the United Nations General Assembly from June 23rd, 2017 about the dominance of the biomedical in just a second. But my question to the mad folks here is, why are we really here? We're not going to change their minds. They are not going to listen to our demands. And I don't want to work with them within these oppressive systems. I don't want to compromise. I want the total eradication of the power they have over minds and bodies. I want unification of the radical mental health movement, the MAD movement, the neurodivergent or neurodiversity movement, the disability rights movement, in a movement that centers and supports black, indigenous, and brown folks' healings, that decolonizes through concrete practice of healing justice principles. I want a healing justice movement that in practice centers, not tokenizes, black, indigenous, and brown leadership in a sustainable way. I want the eradication of white supremacy culture, patriarchy, gender binaryism, and internalized oppression within our movements and built into the mental health and medical systems towards true unification in actual neurodivergence diversity. What I mean is nothing about us without us must center those voices who are literally being taken away from them by psychiatry and police violence, who are imprisoned, institutionalized, or killed for the color of their skin, the expression of their behavior due to the content in their mind and the emotional trauma they've endured interpersonally, intergenerationally, and systemically via the roots of America and the colonial world's founding in indigenous genocide and black slavery. So I'll start with the quotes from the UN report. The biomedical model regards neurobiological aspects and processes as the explanation for mental health conditions. It was believed that biomedical explanations such as chemical imbalance, quote unquote, would bring mental health closer to physical health and general medicine, gradually eliminating stigma. That has not happened. And many of the concepts supporting the biomedical model in mental health have failed to be confirmed by further research. Diagnostic tools such as International Classification of Diseases and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders continue to expand the parameters of individual diagnosis without solid scientific basis. Critics warn that this could that the overexpansion of diagnostic categories encroaches upon human experience in a way that could lead to narrowing acceptance of human diversity. However, the field of mental health continues to be over-medicalized, and the reductionist biomedical model with support from psychiatry and the pharmaceutical industry dominates clinical practice, policy, research agendas, medical education, and investment in mental health around the world. The psychosocial model has emerged as an evidence-based response to the biomedical paradigm. It looks beyond without excluding biological factors, understanding psychological and social experiences as risk factors contributing to poor mental health and positive contributions to well-being. The promotion and protection of human rights in mental health is reliant upon a redistribution of power in the clinical, research, and public policy settings. Decision-making power in mental health is concentrated in the hands of biomedical gatekeepers, in particular, biological psychiatry backed by the pharmaceutical industry. If they won't build us safe mental health systems, so this is just me now. If they won't build us safe mental health systems that work, I say, let's not try to reform a system that is flawed in essence. Let's build a new fucking system. What we propose and what we have been practicing is the creation of the people's DSM, or different states of mind matter. A community-based project and process that navigates old frameworks and language towards the creation of new language, concepts, and patterns in regards to inner experience and expression. We're using community-based data that is relational and local to NYC, and the goal is creating an online interactive field that guides you through what you visually, written, or nonverbal expressions may need from what individual stories and community data we have sourced in our workshops. Starting in the radical mental health scene that is very centered in the Lower East Side, thus more white-dominated spaces last year, this year we are holding workshops in my local neighborhood of Harlem and my neighbors in the Bronx. Already we have found that the people's DSM must first and foremost be trauma-informed in a way that acknowledges how systems of oppression traumatize, especially centrally around race, gender, and ability. There is a need to break down old labels, especially in how they are used psychosocially within this biomedical framework. And we want to take behavioral patterns described in the DSM and include a destigmatized link with not only the stereotyped negative behaviors, but also positive behaviors that are associated with certain labels not currently listed in the book. For example, the awful label of borderline personality disorder, or as the ICD calls, emotionally unstable personality disorder, which I believe should at least be classified in the DSM as complex trauma or complex PTSD, and is used against mostly femme or assigned female at birth, especially black and brown folks who are sensitive enough to feel the entirety of their emotions. But isn't intense sensitivity lauded in terms of the arts? With great emotional sensitivity comes great artistic power. With great artistic power comes the ability to change hearts, minds, and culture. So how I see it, with a way to focus the totality of our emotions, we have the power to change the world. For me, I call this model within myself not borderline personality disorder, but the spiral of emotional entirety. In the creation of the People's DSM, we have looked into inner experience both as a truth or a core that extends outwards to touch others, not just in expression, but in behavior. Great. I'm gonna skip around. Creation of the People's DSM means not only looking at trauma and healing interpersonally or within the family system, but an indigenous way in healing 7 generations before and after, looking at intergenerational trauma within the whole community and society itself. Creation of the People's DSM means asking what happened, how did it affect you, what sense did you make of it, what did you do to survive, what are your strengths, what is your story. Creation of the People's DSM means self-determination of what labels and what medicines we want in our bodies, what labels we use for ourselves. Acknowledging that many things can and should be considered medicine, with many medicines having desired and undesired effects. Creation of this People's DSM means creation of a psychosocial model of organizing and aiding the inner experience of being whole. Whole being linked to being physical, being emotional, being environmental, being occupational, being social, being mindful, being spiritual. The reality of capitalism and colonialism on society means that we have been disconnected, oppressed, and regulated to how to be whole by making individuals responsible for all this being what should be communally taken care of. The reality of capitalism and colonialism means that all our beings have been reduced to what we can afford, what boxes we fit into, what race, gender, what minds or bodies we have, what historically our family could provide to us in order for our financial being, a being that is not integral within the body but created by humanity against humanity, or true community being. I just want to do one song. Great. This song is interactive, and it's, let me just get the song. It's called, so I'm going to need your help. Can somebody else hold it while I sing? Because I can't sing and play and do this. I need somebody to hold that while I sing. Yeah. So it goes sort of like this. I'll give a few examples and then I'll ask for some suggestions. No, you have to press this. Yeah. So I'll give a few. The trigger. Oh, it's off. Okay. Hello? Great. So I'll give a few example choruses, and then just you can either think about what do you not want diagnosed by the APA, that's like this list over here, and also this list over here, what are the institutions of oppressions in our lives that won't save us. Institutions won't save us, we have to save ourselves. The institutions won't save us, we have to save ourselves. The government will not save us, we have to save ourselves. The government will not save us, we have to save ourselves. Psychiatry will not save us, we have to save ourselves. Psychiatry will not save us, we have to save ourselves. The APA will not save us, we have to save ourselves. The APA will not save us, we have to save ourselves. Does anybody have any ideas to add to this list? You can keep going with some of the ones I've come up myself. The patriarchy won't save us, we have to save ourselves. The patriarchy won't save us, we have to save ourselves. Any ideas? Capitalism won't save us, we have to save ourselves. Capitalism won't save us, we have to save ourselves. Commercialism won't save us, we have to save ourselves. Commercialism won't save us, we have to save ourselves. I'll get the part B part. We'll go to the part B part. Don't diagnose my personality. That's just me, that's just me, that's just me. Don't diagnose my gender identity. That's just me, that's just me, that's just me. Don't diagnose my community. That's just me, that's just me, that's just me. Any ideas? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here we go. Thank you. Thank you.
This is the. Hello? Kevin is going to read a statement made by Emily Cutler. Okay, thank you. Press the buttons.
Zinlin or Zinlin? I don't know. Yeah, I can't read it at the same time. Hello? Hello? Yeah. I'm going to read a statement on behalf of someone who couldn't be here, a friend of mine, Emily Cutler. According to physicians and best-selling author Dr. Gabor Mate, every human being has two complementary needs: attachment or connection with others, and authenticity, or the ability to fully be ourselves. In my opinion, it is impossible to have the former need met without the latter. When we are unable to express who we truly are, how we are feeling, how we process and make sense of the world around us, and our deepest fears and dreams, we cannot fully connect with anyone else. What does this have to do with psychiatry? We live in a world that constantly and relentlessly punishes us for expressing ourselves authentically. Our society often views emotions as a sign of weakness, alternative realities as indications of impaired judgment, difference as a form of illness that needs to be cured, and distress as a result of irrational thinking. We are taught to be afraid of this kind of authenticity in both ourselves and others, to be ashamed of who we are and how we feel, and to be embarrassed of others' raw expression of themselves. To me, no system of thought reflects the cultural tendency better than psychiatry and the notion of mental health. The ideology of psychiatry and mental health, or as neurodiversity scholar Nick Walker likes to put it, the pathology paradigm posits that there is only one correct, healthy way of being, and any sort of divergence from that way of being is illness or disorder. Any level of emotion that surpasses the DSM's arbitrary cutoff for what constitutes a healthy amount of feeling, any belief or viewpoint that strays from the bounds of what doctors have decided is normal, any desire or wish that has been deemed unrealistic or irrational. These are all just a few examples of authentic expressions that are deemed by mental health professionals as a need of treatment. The pathology paradigm is the foundation of a system in which people are punished violently for these kinds of expressions. Words cannot quite capture what it feels like to not own the rights to own your own body, to fully describe the horrific realization that you do not have the right to say no. Involuntary civil commitment and forced treatment means so many things to me. The terror of being locked in a closet-sized room with glass windows, unsure of when I would be released, the panic I felt when I was ordered to take off my clothes for a strip search, the apprehension that I would slip up and falter from my model prisoner persona for even a second and be held longer. The restlessness and emptiness of waiting to be released each minute, feeling like an hour, the shame and regret I felt over not attending to my own college graduation due to being locked up instead. Some of my friends, coworkers, and comrades, forced treatment has meant being electroshocked with and without anesthesia, being injected with powerful antipsychotics, and being subjected to behavioral therapies in efforts to remove who they are through rewards and sometimes physical punishments. For all of this, we are told we should be grateful. One could argue that even the notion of forced treatment is the ultimate form of victim blaming. Survivors are constantly told that because the way they are expressing ourselves were symptoms of an illness and need to be treated. The use of force was justified. You should be glad someone cared enough to get you the help you needed, I regularly heard. It is not just the use of state-sanctioned force and violence that limits our ability to be ourselves. It is also social coercion, the social and environmental factors that make life very difficult for people to be seen as different. Everyday people face discrimination and prejudice for expressing thoughts and feelings they have been trained to see as normal. Of course, I believe that mental health industry exploits and perpetuates this prejudice. In a world where there are the potential consequences of just expressing different thoughts, feelings, and actions, how can we expect anyone to be themselves? And if no one can be themselves, then how can then anyone connect? I guess there. As humans, we are also incredibly different from one another. We are vastly different ways of experiencing, processing, and responding to the world around us. And that is a beautiful thing. The world would be awful boring if we only are the same. But sometimes when one considers how different we all are, it's a mystery how we manage to connect and relate. It is the feeling very lonely and isolating to realize that you are the only person in the world who possesses and fully understands your exact values, beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and personality. Sorry, yeah. Hello. While we all have differences, there are universal experiences we all share. Real connection comes from those shared experiences. To be human is to feel pain, sadness, loss, anger, fear, joy, happiness, and helpfulness. To be human is to have strongly held values and beliefs that are shaping our lives. We can all relate and empathize with these experiences. Being forced to suppress them, what is left is to connect over. I believe that there is nothing more powerful than the human connection that occurs when one person expresses a unique thought, feeling, or experience, and another person responds, me too. It is in these moments that we begin to feel less alone. I guess that's it.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? 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 Hello?
Microphone situation?
Hello?
It's working.
Hello, now, direct from Floyd County, Virginia, a former resident of New York, here is Marty Felker.
Sure. My name is Marty Felker, and I'm here on an anniversary of sorts.
Hello?
Can you hear me without this? Okay. Can you hear me at all? Is it working?
Yeah, that's better, yeah.
Okay. Over 50 years ago, I first came and left college to come to New York City, come back to New York City because I wanted to write the great American novel and basically to hook up with my high school girlfriend. And I called up Bellevue Hospital at the time and asked them whether they could help me out and give me an EEG, which I just heard about because I thought I had maybe strange brainwaves. And so I went down to 20th Street, I believe that's where it is, correct me now. And they said, sure, you can get an EEG, just come this way. And they took off all my street clothes, they put me in a prison garb, and they threw me into the violent ward of Bellevue Hospital in 1966. So that was the start of my mental health career. And the violent ward of Bellevue Hospital in 1966 was really not a very pleasant place to be. It consisted of men and women were completely segregated, for example, and the only time once a week that men got to see women was when the men would be in a room and they would be, the only thing they would have would be playing pool, and the woman would be sewing. The woman would be sewing. I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. I've never done this before. The woman would be sewing, and there were armed guards around to make sure there was not so-called hanky-panky going on. And besides, they were labeled as violent, which I never saw any such thing, except that I was raped. But anyway, so my mental health career is now finished because I've not been back to a hospital in 14 years, and I have stopped taking psych medicine, which is the best thing I could have done. I just stopped taking it cold turkey. I was taking large amounts of Seroquel that were prescribed for me, and I found out by seeing a therapist who was certainly not part of the system, I was able to realize that I was not what I was labeled. I did not have a mental illness, that my problems stemmed from PTSD, which was caused by trauma in my youth and adolescence. I had a very abusive father who abused me physically and emotionally. So let me come back to the point that's going on. The theme of this demonstration is first do no harm, and people should, this is what our theme is. And the reality is, though, that doing harm is the very first thing that happens when you get involved with the medical health industry. And that is when they put a label on you. And they have to put a label on you because otherwise they will not get paid. Okay? So, you know, you say all kinds of things about capitalism, whatever. And when I was in some hospitals in Virginia, and I've been in a dozen more with 4 states, the second thing that happens after they label you is that they send somebody from the business department to ask you, how are you going to pay for this? And if you have no way of paying, you'll be lucky, because they'll turn you away from the hospital. So, what I can say is I was very disheartened. I didn't know how this would go, and I'm very much pleased and more heartened because I am seeing younger people here. And so, the more we have some younger people taking up the cause of fighting the powers that be, the better off the whole country will be. So anyway, that's pretty much. I mean, I can go into my story, but and people get used to that being written down, and I'm not. I don't really do writing much anymore. Part of that is due to the fact that I was taking, was forced to take pretty much lithium for decades, and like Allison Himes, I have now fourth stage kidney function disease, and I'm on the verge of needing dialysis and maybe a kidney transplant. So taking lithium and being told the lie that they always tell you, you've got to take this for the rest of your life. Okay, I've lost my teeth, most of my teeth. Okay, I'm on thyroid. I have to take thyroid medicine for the rest of my life. And I have no history of thyroid illness in the whole family going back forever. Okay, it contributed to some of my liver problems, which fortunately have been able to be resolved. But he's telling me that I'm not using this thing. My kidneys are not going to be able to regenerate themselves. And another interesting fact, though, is that most of you must know that that people that are described as having SMI, serious mental illness, are living, and this is UN does this, so I have no reason to doubt it, saying live 25 years less than an average person, simply because they have serious mental illness. Well, that's making me feel like I'm a real survivor, because I just turned 70, and what I say to myself is that means that I'm 95 years old and mental illness. So that's all I want to say. Basically, I'm glad that all you guys are surviving. Keep on surviving. We got to keep on fighting. We got to make our demands and our history and everything else known to the general population. Those people over there, they make a living from mental illness. They don't live mental illness. Thank you very much.
Let's have a big hand for Marty Felker. All right, here comes Harry Lichtenstein. Some of you might know him. He's, I think he's Mind Freedom New York, isn't he? Yeah. All right, Harry, it's yours.
Is it in? Okay, I will. Hello? Hi, I'm Harry Bentivania Lichtenstein.
I want to say, first of all, that this has been a really great conference because of the quality and the importance of what has been said. Lots of things that have been said are wrong and shouldn't be happening and shouldn't have happened. That is true. But it's important that these things get out. I want to also say that I've heard a lot of things about the system and all. Now, this has been a very successful conference, but we have to get more people into this. If everyone here found 5 people they know who could be a part of this movement, grassroots, real grassroots level, and eventually we'd be asking them to each get 5 people and them to get 5 people. We have to make this grow. So that's one idea I had. The quality is here, but let's get a bigger conference with the same quality not lost. Because if you're going to get change where the evil things we've heard are stopped, it's going to be through making the movement expand. Now, about the whole thing that we've been talking about of mental illness. First of all, mental illness doesn't exist. We're all capable of every emotion imaginable, from anger to being sad, to being happy, to being completely ecstatic and energized, to feeling a little like just want to slow down a little bit. We're capable of all of these things, and none of them are diseases. Your emotions are not diseases. Now, they talk about chemical imbalances. There is no such thing. Before drugs are taken, there's no human being that they can find any chemistry different from them and anyone else. The drugs that they're giving people are causing their chemistry to be different. Not only that, in regular life, yes, if you get angry, you cause through your anger a change in chemistry, but a temporary one, which then when you become happy, it changes another way. As a matter of fact, when good actors really take on the emotions they're acting, their brain chemistry has those temporary changes. They change the way it goes with happiness to anger to sadness and everything else. Now, they make trillions of dollars for the pharmaceutical industry, giving the same drugs, by the way, that they give to people who are cancer patients and all kinds of other diseases. But that's a different story, and they don't help them any more than they help anyone else with diseases they don't have. Mental illness isn't real, so they have make-believe diseases that they give medications for. Now I want to change the topic and jump to something else related to the same thing. Not everyone is forced to take drugs. I've come to these conferences and seen people who defeat the purpose and choose to take the so-called care, and yet they come, not this one, but I've seen people come and say, but they have been helped by their drugs. Fine, no one forced it on them. If they want to believe that, they can. But encourage people not to see psychiatrists. If they need help, talk to their friends, talk to someone they can trust, talk to people who might be knowledgeable, who would be able to help them think about what's bothering them that they want to really deal with in a real way. Don't send them to psychiatrists. Tell them do anything but that. Most people who get into Force Psychiatry first voluntarily enter into it. For example, Ernest Hemingway, who wrote the book, Old Man and the Sea, and other great books, he went to a hospital not knowing better to get his alcoholism cured. They would never have picked him up against his will off the street because he was an alcoholic. Not him, Ernest Hemingway, off the street and forced him into a hospital. But he walked in and he couldn't walk out. They forced electroconvulsive shock therapy on him. Finally, when they did it for a long enough period of time, they decided, now we'll let him go. When he got out, he saw he could no longer write. He somehow remembered something of who he was. He decided he loved writing and he couldn't write. He took a shotgun and blew his head out with a shotgun. After they destroyed his life and they destroyed his ability to write. That's Ernest Hemingway. You know, even as someone as famous as him, you don't find that on major media. Most biographies won't talk about that, but that's a documented fact. That's what happened to him. That part of his life and being in the institution only because he walked in for help. Tell people don't walk into the psychiatric profession for help is my point. Because most people who get things forced upon them first voluntarily go to them. If people didn't voluntarily go to them for help, most of the people who were forced, not everyone, would never have been forced into the harmful treatments. So that is a trap to walk into them. You can help a lot of people by getting them to see you, see your friends, see their friends, see people they can trust, and trust that they can overcome their problems. They don't need their help to begin with. You have things bothering you, deal with them. Tell them, okay? So anyway, I guess I'm going to keep this short and say I want to motivate you, help other people. Get 5 people at a time for their own good, and to help other people, help themselves, etc. To get more people to join this movement. Let's make it bigger. But start at a real grassroots level. And that's all I have to say right now, okay? So I really hope I've encouraged you and to go on with, you know, going from here where they are and bringing more people in and helping other people too. That's it.
Okay, hello. Give a good hand to Harry Lichtenstein over there. And here's Angie from St. Louis. Is that right?
So I wrote this for Mad in America in honor of my friends that I lost to benzodiazepine withdrawal that doesn't exist. There is an optical illusion about every person we meet. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Tim, when I heard the news, I nearly collapsed in my bathroom. I felt his presence. It was more real than me writing these words to you. He told me, tell her it was an accident. I am so sorry. Tell her it was an accident. Those words repeated themselves to me for 4 days until his wife could call me to tell me that she was okay. It was a Tuesday. Tim Hunt kissed his wife on the cheek and said for her not to forget to wake him up the first thing next morning for a doctor's appointment. Don't forget, he shook his finger. 20 minutes later, his wife, while sleeping on the couch, awoke to a single gunshot. I never asked where the bullet pierced him. I wanted to remember him the way I last saw him. Army crew cut, big biceps, and shiny white teeth with a smile that was contagious to anyone who spoke to him. Hindsight is 20/20. There were no signs because the only sign that anyone needed to see was that he was on Ambien. A known side effect of Ambien is that people eat in their sleep, drive cars, get in wrecks, and wake up in jail not knowing how they got there. Although Ambien is a Z-drug, it acts similar to a benzo and can harm inhibition. Would it be so hard to believe that a medication took away his inhibition? Josh. Josh was a part of our online support group for many months after learning that a slow taper was the method he should try instead of cold turkeying Valium. He tapered over a year before he jumped off a tiny dose, probably less than 0.005 milligrams. There's no such thing as a small dose when your brain chemistry is affected. After jumping off, he experienced severe respiratory distress. He felt like there was a plastic bag over his head while trying to breathe through a straw. I imagine his chest felt like it was padlocked and caving in on itself. No matter how deep and slow he breathed, his body could not get satisfied from his last breath. Josh couldn't leave his couch, and he had to move in his parents at 43 years old.
Josh had short brown hair, glasses. His Facebook profile picture was of him sitting in the bank of a shallow river. You could see the browns and oranges of river rock, tiny ripples of white water as it ran over them. Josh was smiling, as if about to skip a rock. Hiking boots and Columbia shorts, a well-worn blue t-shirt. On August 17, 2016, Josh shot himself. I never asked where the bullet landed. Members of the online support groups wrote public posts about how benzos had killed him, how the pharmaceutical industry had murdered him, and how suicide is not always a selfish act. Ever wonder what happened to Eminem? Why did he disappear for a few years? Xanax withdrawal. How about Jonathan Davis from Korn? Same thing. 20 years ago it was Stevie Nicks and Klonopin. She was quoted as saying that withdrawal from Klonopin was worse than cocaine addiction, and it took her nearly 3 years to heal from it. I'm going to skip to the part that I wrote for survivors. You wouldn't know by looking at us. We look normal. We sound normal. We act normal. We came off drugs like these. Yeah, a stigma, taboo, don't talk about it, or they will call the authorities and have you locked into a white padded room, wearing only a hospital gown, no shoelaces. You wouldn't know that we are ex-mental patients, no longer believing the lie that we are broken and needing pills to fix it. Prozac deficient, Ativan malabsorption, round holes in our cells that only need their drugs. You wouldn't know that psychiatric medications are more dangerous than, say, heroin, crack, cocaine, any of them, really. You wouldn't know that Ativan did this to us. Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, tiny crumbly pills that we took as or less than prescribed. The Macklemore song plays in the background, my drug dealer was a doctor. But we aren't even addicts. Every day for years we twisted that lid back on. Clack, clack, clack. You wouldn't know how long we endured these intense withdrawal symptoms that made us want to run screaming to our neighbors. You wouldn't know that if we were to do that, they would put our delicate and damaged brains on more meds.
We all made it here.
And the other thing I was happy that we feel that it's like to something that maybe we've done.
Hold on, I lost Wi-Fi. Fuck. Okay, hold on. Almost done.
Appreciate it.
Okay, you wouldn't know if we were to do that, put us on more drugs. It would be like gasoline on a fire. Too many cells left naked after the drug was removed from the system. The biology, the physiology, and the psychopharmacology, they are all abnormal in us. You wouldn't have a frame of reference to relate to this, none. But please try to understand that we are suffering, that there is meaning in our words, that although we cannot quite touch our lives, we remember that the way that hair falls during a crew cut, the way that white water washes over the green and brown rocks, and the color blue as it reflects an invisible force that keeps us alive.
Sarah Framing. Does anyone want to come up to speak? We're open to volunteers now. You think you have something to say? We'd love to hear it. I mean, certainly someone has something to say about that. Oh, you've already spoken. Someone who hasn't spoken. All right, Harry.
Since no one came up just now, I do want to add one thing that I didn't say. When I talked about there being no such thing as mental illness, I should have followed up with the corollary that the medical model of psychology and psychiatry does not belong, because there's no such thing as chemical imbalances, and it has nothing to do with diseases. It has to do with choices and really dealing with the things that bother us and the things we're concerned with when we have concerns, and facing them and dealing with them in constructive ways. The medical model, I had once done a talk at at some of the conferences about replacing the medical model with a coaching model of psychology and psychiatry. And that coaching model involves where coaching, you don't tell people what their goals are, they have their goals. And you don't tell them what to do, you are a consultant to them about steps they could take to reach their goals. They either try the steps you suggest to them or they don't. But the medical model is really doesn't fit reality at all. Don't ever for a moment even believe that what they call mental illnesses are illnesses to begin with and have any foundation in anything. They don't. To take human emotions and human behaviors and to classify them as illnesses is wrong. Now let's go to criminality. You're innocent until you're proven guilty of a crime. Yet, if someone if they want to skip a person's due process, is picked up by the police for a crime they may have committed, and they don't have enough evidence, all they need to do is get psychiatrists into it to say, you're dangerous. So even if you didn't commit the crime you were picked up for, the evidence from us is you would have committed it tomorrow. We're telling you you're a dangerous person who maybe you didn't just now, but now we're sure you're going to commit it tomorrow if you didn't today. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? How can that person be guilty of a crime that a psychiatrist now will say they're going to commit tomorrow? They can't be guilty of it. People should not be treated like criminals when they haven't committed crimes because of psychiatrists who don't know a thing about what they're doing. They don't have the ability to predict who's going to commit a crime and who isn't. If you went by them, you would find the real criminals who commit crimes they never would have said would have done it. The people they say would commit crimes, you leave them alone, they're not the ones who commit crimes. So I hope I get across to you. The medical model has to go. We have to start having people face things as they are, and criminals who where it's proven they've really committed something should be, be sentenced for whatever they're sentenced for, and they should have to, get in trouble for their crimes. Okay.
What's your name? Wayne Ramsey, folks.
Does that make sense?
Hello, everybody. I'm a lawyer from Texas, but I do things throughout the country. And one of the things that I've learned from personal experience is the importance of the right to jury trial and civil commitment for so-called mental illness. It exists in many states, but not in many others. I've got a theory that could establish it in some states, and I just want anybody here, if you know of anybody, who has standing to challenge the lack of right to jury trial, particularly in the states of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Arizona, or Florida, contact me, please.
Thank you. All right, here comes another person. What's your name?
My name is Juan.
Warren? Juan.
Hello. My name is Juan, and I'm here on behalf of a friend. He's been institutionalized for about 15 years. His father was a famous psychiatrist. Yet, somehow, his father couldn't do anything, and they put him on a whole lot of these horrific drugs. And he's been going downhill for the past 15, 20 years. He's been institutionalized right after his father died. I don't know if anything can be done for him at this moment, but if anyone does know, please approach me, because his mother suffered breast cancer, and she's dealing with the son by herself, with no one else. She's the one that goes out to visit him. Yet his father, I guess he was experimenting with him with these damn drugs that they put people on. And I would just like to know if anything can be done for him to save him before he is killed in these psychiatric institutions. Because that's what she's waiting for him to die. perhaps there's hope for him. So I've been concerned about him for about 20 years. And there is so much taking place today in society that even Indigenous, Spanish-speaking children are having PTSD because their parents, they feel that their parents are not going to be home when they return home. So the assault on society is intensifying daily, and there's no response that is effective. So if anyone knows if there's any help for my friends, please contact me, because perhaps we can open the doors to other possibilities. Let the communities know that there is hope. He is the grandson of one of the most famous musicians from the Caribbean, from the merengue genre, and it's heartbreaking for him to be in that situation and no one reaching out to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. If anyone knows how to help Juan with Juan's friend, please contact him. Does anyone want to address the APA over here? Do you have anything you want to say? It hasn't been said yet? It hasn't spoken?
Okay, so I can give you my name and number. Would you like my name and number? Okay, if it's on the website. And I can get you in contact with
their lives.
Did you want to speak? Say anything?
Sorry, I'm like so overwhelmed.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, too many things going on right now.
We don't have to do anything. Yeah, just leave it.
Okay.
If you wanted to.
Mental illness, or so-called mental illness, is not real. It's just a tool used to control people, whether by authoritarian governments or fascist families. And many of these fascist controlling families, they very often push people into psychiatry, although sometimes governments might push people that are considered outgroups or whatever to psychiatry. So psychiatry is a tool of fascism. It's been linked with fascism. The genetic theories promoted by psychiatry, they have very heavy Nazi influences, I would say, and that psychiatry very likely created the Nazis, or a lot of them were these racist pseudo scientists in the late 19th, early 20th century, or with the eugenics movement. Many of them likely created Nazism when they were in the Thule Society in the 19-teens or 1920s. And many of the treatments, so-called, quote, treatments, unquote, done by psychiatry, they actually have fascist origins, whether ECT, which was actually developed in fascist Italy under Ugo Cerletti, who was working in fascist Italy under Mussolini. And many of these many of our pharmaceutical corporations were spun off from IG Farben. And also, psychosurgery, it was actually invented in Portugal by Egas Moniz, who was working under the fascist Salazar dictatorship in Portugal.
at that time, in the 1920s when he invented it. So psychiatry is a lot of links with fascism, and Ernst Rudin, not a psychiatrist who invented the genetic, quote, theory, unquote, of the of the cause, quote, cause, unquote, of so-called schizophrenia. He was a Nazi himself. And so psychiatry, I would say, has a lot more connections with Nazism than people realize. And it's really a tool used of fascist control. It doesn't really help people. Woo!
Excuse me? That was, what's your name?
Laura Forst.
Laura Forst, from Texas, of course. Laura Forst from Texas.
No, but two people. It doesn't look right if one person picks it up.
Very light.
Yeah, three can do it.
The other side?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, two on each side.
Yourself. Okay. There we go. Just like that. Where are we taking it?
We're going to do it over in this area. Right behind us.
I can help you if you want.
Follow behind us in the sad procession. What we want is a sad procession up to the car, the front of the car, and back. We're staying within our, but if we can make a long sad procession over, that'd be nice.
Are we putting it in the back there?
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna call it.
We want a sad procession as we go around in this oval. A sad procession following us around in this oval.
It is calling.
Let's try to make a sad procession follow us around.
How many more laps, Harry?
Jana, join the sad procession. Everyone, join the sad procession.
Walk with us.
Join the sad procession.
So now around this way, join the sad procession. Let's try to get it bigger.
I know it's a sad procession, but it's hard to not laugh when you're calling it a sad procession.
Yeah, no, I
Psychiatry, let's stop taking these drugs.
Could you join us for the last time? We're going to go around one more time. Could everyone join? Join. Let's join the last time.
Okay. All right, I'm going to hand it off. Yeah.
Third drugs.
Oh, she sat.
Remembering Pat Riser. Who's Pat Riser?
No, in the back.
Yeah, the person just sat.
No,
See?
no one's not to see. We temporarily it'd be like that, and later it'd readjust.
Oh, I heard about it.
I think that went pretty good, right? They've got a lot of filming, and they filmed it. No, they said it wasn't. They could actually edit that out. They don't need audio. Yeah, but they can.
Oh, yeah. Radio power.
Even so, I don't know if that would ruin it for everyone. I was trying to get everyone this way. Yeah, in the future, the footage too. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Oh, free.
I think that anyone who require will see the symbology of anyone not required. I don't think they're going to be.
Рассказывает, что она сделана акции протеста и группы.
Like that, or without it being called the session where people interact.
Alright, I'm gonna power this thing down. Alright folks, that is all from today in New York at the APA 2018 protest.